Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm Allison Walden, Senior Vice President of Resource Development for the Tulsa Regional Chamber. I'm here today with my good friends, Josiah Sutton and Michael Amberg, to discuss business and marketing strategies for small business. Josiah Sutton is the Vice President of Marketing, Business Development, and Government Relations for CommunityCare. Josiah is accountable for the revenue growth of CommunityCare in all commercial, Medicare, and ancillary lines of business. In addition, he oversees government relations, marketing operations, product development, new market expansion, and channel strategy. Michael Amberg is the Regional Director of Sales for CommunityCare. Michael and his team are responsible for new membership and revenue growth across all commercial lines of business. Previously, Michael was the Director of Business Development for Kaiser Permanente, Colorado, and additionally, Michael owned and operated a small business in Tulsa for nearly a decade. Josiah and Michael, I'll pass it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you for having us, Allison. It's great to be here, and thank you all for joining us today. I can't think of a more relevant topic than discussing revenue growth, networking, and sales in the midst of a global pandemic and all the changes that we continue to deal with every single day. Michael and I are gonna tackle this complicated topic together. So really excited to be here. And as I look back at Michael and I, we've known each other for 15 years. Worked together in 3 different companies and now working together at CommunityCare. And I still remember the day that Michael called me and said, hey, he was working for a large organization, a great paying job, great benefits, tremendous upward mobility. And he said, hey, I'm quitting and I'm going to start my own business. And externally, I said, great job. I'm happy for you and let me know what I can do to support. And internally, I was freaking out with a lot of anxiety and fear for him. And so I would say small business owners that are going through a lot right now, Michael's been there with you. And so I'm excited to hear what he has to say about network development. And maybe we start there, Michael, if you want to go through some of the high-level success factors that you've noticed as being a small business owner in Oklahoma.
Yeah, thank you, Josiah, and thank you, Allison, and to the Chamber for allowing us to be here today. And I think some of the things that you both mentioned of owning a business for almost 10 years. I've lived in the Tulsa area for 20 of the last 25 years. I understand the vital importance that small businesses play in the success in our community. And so if I look back to when I started the business, and I had that same fear and those same insecurities, I may not have projected them, but they were definitely felt internally. I think that's the first thing I would like to call out is that it's okay. It's normal to have those fears and insecurities. If you don't have them, I'd almost be a little bit worried. But it's learning how to take those fears, take those insecurities, and harness those into something positive and into an actionable plan. It's taking it and moving it into an actionable plan and leveraging that into success. So I think first and foremost, it's good to call that out. I also think too, anytime you're starting something new, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable, and you have to realize that's okay. I look back to the very first customer that I signed up when I had started my business. I walked in, didn't know what I was doing, didn't know how to run a business, didn't really know much of anything, but sat down, had a meaningful conversation with him. I had done research prior to going in. I knew what I wanted to accomplish, and left with the deal. And they were the first customer that we signed up. And 5 years later, I went in and sat down with the owner and said, thank you so much for giving me the start. I really appreciate it. You were my first customer. And she looked at me and said, I had no idea. I thought you'd been doing this for years. And so all that to say, just be confident. You've put yourself out there. You've had this idea that you think is worth sharing. So just be confident in that. I think too, it's important to call out the power of networking and building meaningful relationships. I think you need to know the people that you need to know in your industry in order to be successful, and then develop a plan on how you're going to get in touch with them, leveraging current contacts, attending great events that the Chamber puts on, being out in the community, being involved in the community. Those types of things are going to go a long ways to building your network, and recognizing what your weaknesses are and finding people that can serve as mentors for you that will help you in the areas where you're weak. I think next, and my team will laugh when they hear me say this, and whether it was here, the business that I own, wherever. But one of the things that I've said over and over for years is be strategic and intentional in all you do. So everything that you do needs to have some sort of purpose behind it. I use that in my personal life. I use that in business, wherever. So I'll use events as an example. We were just talking about all the great events that the Chamber puts on. If you're going to an event, don't just go to the event. Research who's going to be attending. Are there people that you want to get to know? Have a plan of attack. What's the purpose of the event? Is it networking? Is it social? Know what you're doing. So just be very strategic and intentional about it in all that you do. I'd say along those same lines, have very clear and concise goals. Make sure that you know the direction that you're headed. If you don't have a goal, if you don't know where you're going, you never know when you get there. So be sure to have clear and concise goals. Keep them simple. I think as well, you need to be persistent. Gosh, you're going to hear no a lot more than you're going to hear yes. And that's no matter what industry you're in. If you're starting a business, you are going out and selling a service product, whatever it is, you're going to hear no. And so you can go two ways with that. You can go the direction of, okay, good, time to move on, which sometimes that's appropriate. But there are other times too where my mentality when I hear no, I typically will take that personally I'll take that personally to the extent of I didn't do my job well enough to explain to you why you need to say yes yet. So that allows me to go back, re-strategize, and re-engage. So take that to that next step further. I think lastly, what I would say is just don't give up. I think Thomas Edison said it, and I'm paraphrasing, so I may get this a little wrong, but he said something to the effect of, it's surprising how many failures happen when people are so close to success. A lot of times you'll have that fear of, oh my gosh, I'm not doing the right things, I'm not being as successful as I thought I was going to be. You don't know what's around the corner. So keep plugging away, believe in yourself, believe in the ideas that you have.
So can I ask how many times you were in, as a small business owner, did you almost give up?
A lot. I don't know that I could put a number on it, but it was a lot. Every roadblock that was hit, that question comes into the back of your mind, am I doing the right thing? Did I make the right choices? Am I going to fall down? But I think what I did was I had a very strong network of both peers and mentors that helped me along the way, that said, I've been where you are. I know what you're going through, and keep pushing through, and gave me that messaging. And lo and behold, I did, and success followed. So that's great. Well, as Josiah mentioned, we've worked together for a really long time, and I've always been very impressed with your communication strategy. Can you maybe spend a few minutes talking about some effective communication strategies, especially in light of everything that's going on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's surprising to me as you think about communication. This is not rocket science, right? We're not sending anybody to the moon, and yet, as simple as a strategy and as simple as a concept as sales may be, or communication, it's shocking how few are able to execute on the ability to communicate effectively. And I don't know if there's a single right way to communicate. You can Google search effective communication, and you'll probably come up with hundreds, if not thousands, of books, a lot of quotes, and a lot of experts that will tell you different ways to communicate. For me, I try to narrow it down to just bite-size areas. And number one is knowing your audience. And Michael mentioned this: doing research ahead of time, to be intentional about why you're going to an event and what you're trying to communicate. But don't overwhelm yourself in knowing your audience. You can get lost right now with a Google search on somebody's name, and you have all the background searches, and you have social media, and you have their company mission statement and their values. So narrow down just a handful of things to articulate in knowing your audience. And then number two is customizing your message. Nobody wants to hear a boilerplate response, or a boilerplate, something that the VP of marketing, this guy puts together and says, okay, go out and present. Make sure you're customizing. And you can still use some of those templated items, but try to ensure there's something specific to that customer based on your research. Number three is practice. And this is not only your verbally what you're going to say, but your nonverbal skills as well. I probably shouldn't say this because everybody's going to watch for it throughout the rest of the presentation, our time together. But I'm a head nodder. But I've been around others that are a head nodder this way. And you are sending nonverbal communications to that individual that what you're saying is negative or bad, or they should run, abort mission. So practice in the mirror, as dumb as it may sound. It's critically important that you are ready and you understand how your audience is going to perceive not only what you're saying, but also the nonverbal areas. And then, as Michael said, be intentional, know why you're there, and then finally know when to shut up and listen. Michael does this very well to the point of making me uncomfortable when we've been on sales calls where he will stop talking and leave space for the customer to respond. I'm not as good at doing that. I like to talk. But what's interesting is every time that happens and just the point that I'm about ready to jump in and take over the meeting again, lo and behold, the customer opens up and they start sharing information that we probably never would have heard otherwise. So know when to be quiet. So when I think about effective communication, those are the four things that I focus on. But there's also a sales call aspect to this, and it's great. You can communicate effectively, but understanding what kind of call you're on is critically important. And so number one, I think it's a relationship call, or the first aspect of a sales call is a relationship call. If you're on that, don't try to sell in the middle of that, right? If you're at a networking event, most likely you're there to build relationships. If you're out passing out your business card and trying to give proposals to customers, Allison may kindly ask you to leave the chamber event. I'm kidding, but be personal in your relationship development and be okay with the fact that you may be developing a relationship that never turns into a customer acquisition, but it may turn into something like Michael and I developed. We were working together. We had no idea that over 15 years later, we would still be working together and have built a strong friendship that started out just as a networking type event. Number two is a strategy call. So on this type of a meeting, when you're communicating with the customer, you are probably rolling your sleeves up. You are probably getting into the weeds of the issues that they are struggling with and problem solving together, and be okay with that. Again, that is not the time to pull out your business card and offer to sell something. And then the third is the negotiation, or maybe the sales pitch, if you will. And during this time, you're working through the details and you're trying to understand what the customer is going through and making sure that you can push them over the edge to the well, that doesn't sound like the right phrase. You can push them to the selling point of wanting to buy whatever it is you're offering. And then finally is closing the business. Right, so ask for the business, and I know that's the cheesy phrase that we all hear, and we don't literally mean walking to somebody and saying, "I would like your business." But if you're not ready to close, you're probably not going to have the close ratio that you need to grow your revenue. So I think all critically important aspects. As I go through all these different areas of communicating effectively and the type of sales call, what I have in my head visually is an in-person meeting. Right? It's an actual networking, face-to-face event. And I don't know if you all know this, but we're in the middle of a global pandemic. As the Hamilton line quotes, the world has been turned upside down, quite literally, with what's going on. So, Michael, you somehow have continued to be able to grow revenue and network and build relationships. So can you talk about how you've been able to do that in this shift to a virtual environment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. I think the important thing is to understand how your customer wants to be engaged. That's the first step, is understanding that. They may respond better to text. They may respond better to email. Video chat may be great. We're starting to get to the point where, with appropriate social distancing and mask wearing, where in person is starting to become a little bit more frequent. So just understanding what their need is, and then also balancing that with your own personal needs as well. But once you have that, then the formula is really the same across all platforms. What we've talked about: preparing, being intentional, not being afraid to hear no. All of those things that we've already mentioned, I think, apply. And so I think what I'd like to spend a little time talking about is what you had mentioned, the having the ability to shut up and listen, for lack of a better phrase. What I see all the time, and have seen this for years, what I call information dump. You go in and have a meeting, and you've done your research, you've prepared, you know who you're meeting with, and you go and you just throw it all on the table, and then at the end, like, okay, you ready to go? And then the person that you're talking to never really has a chance to say anything. So I think using those pauses, you don't want to make it awkward or uncomfortable, but you want to use those pauses to learn information, and you will. To your point, I mean, you learn so much information about someone if you just be quiet and listen. So to one up your Hamilton quote, the smile more, talk less. That's very, very appropriate in this situation.
We've copyrighted with Hamilton Broadcast, by the way, all these quotes from the show.
Yeah, right. So what I would challenge you to do, it's going to feel uncomfortable. You may not like it, but the next time you're meeting with a customer, ask a very open-ended question, whether it's whatever platform it is, but ask a very open-ended question, then just be quiet. When it feels uncomfortable to you and you feel like you need to say something, give it a pause. Then give it a little bit more of a pause. And you'll be amazed at what people will share with you. And that's usually where you will get the best information from them. What are their needs? What are they hoping to accomplish? Those types of things. So just be willing to listen. And then I think the other thing too, when you look at relationship building and follow up and all those things, is to understand the importance of how this is very much a long-term play. You're not going to go and build a relationship with somebody and build rapport immediately or in a week or in a month. It's going to take continued follow-up. It's going to take continued engagement, continued proof that you're listening to what they're saying. So understand that's going to take a while. Be persistent. Continue to follow up even if they don't. Just let them know, show them that you're here and you're not going to go away. You have something important you want to talk to them about. And then I think the last thing too is you have to be genuine. It has to be genuine. It can't come across as I'm doing this for business purposes. That'll get you shut down right out of the gate. So you genuinely have to really truly care about what it is that you're representing and then the conversations that you're having. All right. So while we understand a little bit more how to build relationships and effective communication styles. All right, hold on. All right, so while we understand a little bit more on how to effectively communicate and different communication styles and how to follow up and those types of things, what are some different channel strategies that we could employ?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question right now that I'm sure every small business owner, and I know we're doing at CommunityCare, is trying to understand which channel is the most effective to leverage. So number one, just recognize it's going to be industry specific. There are times, I'm sure, as a small business owner, as an organization, that you want to buck the trend, right? Jeff Bezos bucking the trend of a brick and mortar bookshop worked very well for him. But if you're trying to buck the trend to go back the other way, maybe not so much. And so understand the industry that you're in and where it's heading, number one. But then two, regardless of what channel you choose, I would say continue to perform ongoing analysis of that channel. So for CommunityCare, we're in the health insurance industry. Well over 90% of our distribution is performed through third-party entities. These are contracted individuals that contract with CommunityCare and other carriers to represent our products. We perform ongoing analysis monthly, quarterly, and annually to understand really four things, and that's what I'll focus on today, and then I'll go into a little bit of demographic information. Number one is the return on investment. So understanding what the ROI is for each channel and by channel. And for us, the comparison we use is understanding whether we could hire an internal individual to perform the job that we are currently contracting out. Now, I will tell you, the analysis always comes back that no, there's no way for us to replace what our distribution channel does for us through our broker and agent partners. But it's something that we continue to review to ensure that we are having a positive ROI. The second thing is the retention of your customer base, right? The old adage is it's cheaper to maintain an existing customer than to acquire a new one. And so ensuring that you have a high retention rate by channel is critically important. If you have a channel that has tremendous new acquisition growth and you're losing it all in the first 6 months to 12 months, I guarantee you will not be in business long if you continue that trend up. So understanding the retention of it. But then third, and it's sort of related to retention, is the satisfaction rate of the customers that are coming in through that channel. And this goes to a long-term vision for the company, right? A net promoter score. You might have retained customers, but if they're not satisfied and they're telling all their friends and family how unsatisfied they are with your product or your offering, not a good long-term success. So ensuring that you have high satisfaction rates. And then finally is the efficiency of the channel. We've seen some channels that have had great retention, great satisfaction and even a positive ROI. And yet it was all consuming managing that particular channel. It was taking all of the company resources away to focus on keeping that channel up and going. And finally, we had to pull the plug on it because we weren't able to focus on new business development. We weren't able to focus on merger and acquisition activity or really any other strategic concepts because we were focusing so much on that particular channel. So I think those are 4 areas to focus on once you've identified a particular channel that works for your industry. But second to that, one of the easiest things to do is to leverage free resources. You'll hear me talk about free resources a lot today because for CommunityCare, we operate most of our lines of business at zero margin. That's our mission is not to grow margin. Our mission is to provide as much comprehensive care to the greater Tulsa area that we can through both of our owners. So we can't afford to pay a lot of money for expert opinions or expert research, but there's so much free information available. Deloitte publishes monthly and quarterly information. The Tulsa Regional Chamber, the number of times I'm calling them to ask for information, and I'm sure there's great resources you can leverage through their website if you do that research. So I would leverage the free resources and then understand the demographics of your customer base. For CommunityCare, we offer the largest Medicare Advantage offering within Northeast Oklahoma. If we invested in a channel called TikTok, probably not the best investment for CommunityCare in ensuring that our product information was available to Medicare Advantage beneficiaries who are typically over 65 years of age. However, Facebook is the fastest growing mode of communication for the senior population, Medicare beneficiary population. So I think understanding your demographics and understanding what it is that they want to leverage, and again, the resources are available for you to download that. So once you've identified a channel, obviously then cultivating those relationships that you have come across and identified warm leads is the next viable step. I'm still old school face-to-face interactions. So how have you learned to cultivate relationships that we've identified through these virtual channels?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what we've talked about. It's being persistent. It's following up. It's leveraging and leaning on the connections that you've already made. Those types of things. When I look at follow up, I think it's important to set proper expectations. So say you have a virtual meeting with someone. And I've seen it happen time and time again. You get the meeting set up, you prepare, you do all these things, and you get to the end of the meeting, and then it's just over. There's no follow-up, there's no next steps. So you have to be very intentional about setting what those expectations are. Is the next step the next meeting? Is it following up on a key piece of information? Is it leading to the finalist presentation? Knowing what that expectation is and having an idea of that going into it, and then being very intentional about asking for that whenever you're in meeting with them, whether it's virtually, in person, text, email, whatever the platform is. So I think that's really important. The other thing too, I think when you're cultivating those relationships, is remembering all the things that you learn in those awkward pauses and research and all of that. So having some way to capture that information. For me personally, I keep track of a lot of it on a spreadsheet. That works for me. A friend of mine who's a very successful salesperson, he takes it even a step farther, whether he's out at a restaurant and it's his favorite waiter or waitress, or it's a new customer or a prospect, or whatever the case may be. Even friends that he just meets, he will pull out his phone immediately after meeting them, create a contact for them, and write down notes of everything that they learned. And the next time he meets with them, we'll pull out those notes and go through them. So finding something that works for you to remember all those great bits of information, and then using that. And the next time you talk to the person, I think a couple examples that pop into my head are whenever I moved to Colorado, I met a county commissioner, somebody very important in the community that I needed to know, and we talked about a lot of really important things. But he was very excited to talk about his 9 kids that he had, and I thought that was pretty impressive. And he went through all these great things that they're all doing and where they are in their life and whatnot. And I didn't see him again for maybe 6 months, but I'd taken note of that along with several other things. But mentioned that to him, how are whichever child it was, and brought that up, and he was so impressed. He said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you remembered that, and that's really impressive." Well, that's what he took away from it. That builds the relationship. It builds that trust. It builds that rapport. So the next time when you need something, you can truly reach out. So doing that Another example, we having moved back to Tulsa from Colorado, we were meeting with an insurance broker locally, and I noticed in the background she had a poster of Rocky Mountain National Park, which was one of our favorite places to go, and she had several pins put in the map, which, as it turns out, I correctly assumed were different places that she went within Rocky Mountain National Park. So I just mentioned to her, hey, we moved from Colorado, love Rocky Mountain, and my gosh, the conversation took a totally different direction. Things loosened up. We had a great talk, and she opened up on a lot of topics that probably wouldn't have otherwise. And so just finding things like that, and you can do that in person, but you can also do it virtually. A lot of the meetings are being held in either a home office or even in the office, and you see stuff in the background. So it's important to take note of those things and use those and leverage those to help cultivate and build those relationships. So I think it's fair to say that virtual engagement isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So what are some ways that you can learn to maybe navigate those waters and maybe pivot, some tips on how to pivot to online platforms?
Yeah, well, I can 100% tell you that what I'm sharing, I'm sure, is hot off the press for all of us going through this global pandemic and trying to understand how you move 100% of your meetings in person to then convert them virtually. And we've all gone through the hiccups. I think at CommunityCare, we've tried 3 different online platforms to host our meetings. So I would say a few things, and I'm reflecting as I make these comments. That again, I go back to the opening statement I made. This isn't rocket science, and so I think a lot of this has to do with how you personally execute and what you personally take away from this meeting. Thinking about your example about remembering the 9 kids from the customer contact. Number one, I guarantee, because I know you were genuine in remembering that, and you were genuinely interested in whatever his child was doing. And so I think that's critically important, is being genuine. But then number 2, choose what works for you. And I think these virtual platforms are the exact same way. If you're struggling with the virtual platform and it feels awkward and it feels clunky for you, continue to explore. There are so many resources available that you can leverage that oftentimes are not so cost prohibitive that it's only the Fortune 500 company that can afford to purchase. And the example for that is a chat function that I would go over. So we all know about Teams and Zoom and WebEx and the list goes on for video type interaction with your customer base. But we recently we were trying to launch that for our Medicare Advantage population. And we were getting a very low return rate, callback rate for these video calls. And then most of the time it didn't go well. The video wouldn't work. We couldn't get the volume to turn on. There was a lot of background noise. Phones weren't muted, right? The typical conference call phenomena that's going on right now. So we switched to a chat function. We developed a new website, a new landing page for the website. Which again, if you're whatever website platform you were using, there are cost-efficient ways to do that. And we purchased a month-by-month chat function that I think was as low as $60 per month for 3 users to start. And you can pre-program chat responses. So even if you only had yourself and one other employee, or even yourself, you could navigate, when we were testing it out, you could navigate up to 15 chats at the same time because you have a lot of pre-populated responses. And oftentimes the customer is inquiring about things like hours or a place to drop off their check or any changes in the product for the coming year. And so I would say get creative and explore the different venues that might be available and leverage the cost-efficient resources. The second thing I would say is whatever bids you get multiple bids. And again, I know this should go without saying, but this is a real example from a previous role I had. We had a quote come in for a mobile app development. And I'm not joking, there was one quote that was at $0 and we just purchased their subscription fee. And another quote just to develop the app was over $250,000. Same quote, same RFI, same information included. And so when you're getting into the world of technology, just ensure that you're exploring everything. And this is the time, I would say, talking about Michael's leveraging a network and building out subject matter experts and a board of advisors, is leveraging resources around you and having somebody you can call and ask for advice in the IT world. And that could be that you end up hiring somebody to be on staff to run your back end IT operations, but it could be a subscription you purchase that has IT support baked in that you can run by some of these purchase options. The last thing I would say is ensure that your customers are aware of whatever technology you invest in. We've had many times where, and Kaiser Permanente would be a good example, when Michael and I worked there, the organization literally invested billions of dollars, billions with a B, of dollars into technology platforms, and years later we had less than 20% user rate on this technology investment. And then we started doing a use case and realized that the audience that we were marketing to wasn't aware of all the services and tips that we had available. So whatever you choose to invest in, just ensure you make your customers aware and you build in time for user acceptance testing and training for your customer base. So again, we mentioned meeting face-to-face still seems to be the preferred way, but as small businesses began leveraging some of these different technologies, how have you successfully still closed business virtually and giving the same feel to the customer as though you were there on site?
Yeah, thank you. I think, as we've said, we're repeating a lot of things over and over again, but it's because it works. I think preparing, making sure that you're prepared, that you've done all of the work leading up to getting to that point of making that final decision, leveraging all the resources you have. And actually, I'm going to go on a brief tangent here for a second and sing the Chamber's praises. It's such a phenomenal resource to have here in Tulsa, especially. I've served on the board of directors on multiple chambers in different states. And I've got to say the Tulsa Chamber is absolutely the strongest one that I've been a part of. In fact,
well said.
and I wasn't told or prompted or asked to say this. It's true and genuine. But truly, when I moved to Colorado, the first call I made was to the local chamber and got plugged in events that way. And that was one of the ways I got so plugged in so quickly to the community. Same thing when I moved back to Tulsa. That was one of the first things that I did as well. And even more so, when I was in Colorado, and I would mention that I moved from Tulsa and that I was involved with the chamber, the reputation that the chamber has across the country is stellar. Their ears perked up immediately and said, "Oh my gosh, Tulsa's amazing. The chamber is run so well and they have so many great programs and everything." So please, I know a lot of times when we're here living locally, we take for granted what's at our fingertips, but use that, leverage that. So that's one resource. There are several others and many more as well. But so I think making sure that you're prepared, a little research goes a long way. Knowing who you're meeting with, knowing what the purpose of the meeting is. Is it truly a meeting to close the deal? Is it truly a relationship builder? Are you meeting with an influencer, the decision maker? Knowing your audience, knowing who you're meeting with, and knowing the purpose of the meeting, I think is vital. And especially in light of how everything's has gone to a more virtual platform, I think online etiquette too is something to really pay close attention to. We've all been on those Zoom calls where somebody decides to hide themselves, which is great, but then they decide to eat lunch and forget to mute themselves, and it sounds like they're crunching their potato chips directly into the microphone. So don't do that. don't be that person. But truly, just make sure that you're treating the online meeting the same way you would with an in-person meeting. Make sure that your camera is on, even if theirs isn't, so you can see each other. Make sure that you're dressed appropriately for the meeting, as if you were meeting in person. Make sure you smile. Smile more, talk less. Make sure you smile. Make sure you're paying attention to all nonverbal cues, both for yourself and for the other person. If they're disinterested and looking away and not really paying attention, then maybe you need to shift gears a little bit. And along those same lines, don't multitask yourself. Despite how sneaky you think you're being, you can tell. So don't. Just make sure that your sole focus is on that person and what you're doing. The other thing that I would say too is ask the person that you're meeting with, how do they want to engage? Is this the appropriate way that they want to engage? You may assume that they want to meet in person, or you may assume that they want to do a virtual meeting, or you may assume, so ask. They might have a very different opinion than what you thought. And then the last, we talked about this, is ask for the business. And like Josiah said, you don't say, can I have your business? You might, but you have to find the approach that works well for you. I think if I'm looking back and reflecting, a good example that I think of is in an interview process. When I'm hiring somebody, whether it was for my personal business that I owned or the different career paths of the different corporations, when I'm interviewing somebody, if they don't ask me for the business or for the job, they don't get considered. You're going through this whole process, kind of what we talked about. You've done your preparation, you've done the research, you've showed up dressed nicely with an interview packet put together with all these other, you've done all these things right, and then you get up and leave the meeting and leave the interview, and you never actually said, have I done everything that, or is there, oh gosh, lost my train of thought. You've done everything except you haven't said, can I have the job, or the equivalent thereof. I think that's vitally important, is to make sure that you ask for the business in whatever way is appropriate and feels best for you. Mm-hmm. So and then lastly, I would say I think we need to remind ourselves that the goal of every business, small, large, medium, everything in between, is to both retain clients and grow. And if you're not asking for the business, you're not growing. So I will leave it on that note. It's not a magic formula. You just have to ask. So with that, I think that covers our time. And I just want to say thank you very much to Allison, to the Chamber, for allowing us to be here and share some time with you all. And hopefully some of it's been beneficial. And we really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Josiah and Michael. It looks like we have about 5 minutes left for questions, so if you will entertain those. You mentioned a lot of great content and concepts in a short amount of time, and so I wanted to circle back on 1 or 2 of those items that were really appropriate. You mentioned marketing emails, and we've all received those emails from companies trying to gain our business that may have felt inauthentic or maybe canned, as you mentioned. So do you have any advice for small business owners who want to reach out to potential customers via email, but don't want to feel gimmicky or impersonal?
Yeah, I'll take that, at least to give it a first shot. Absolutely, I think the important thing is what we've talked about. Do research, know what your messaging is, know who you're reaching out to. Is this somebody that you're reaching out on a personal level that you know, or are you trying to just get the word out about what your business is, and that's it. So knowing what your audience is, knowing what your messaging is, I think is really important. And being persistent and not being afraid to follow up. I think back to the business that I owned. I wanted to get as much press coverage, word out as much as we could, and so I spent a lot of time going through, and I found every single email address that I could of every single media outlet in the Tulsa area. I didn't have any connections, didn't know anybody at that time, and I probably sent at least 40 to 50 emails over the course of several months without any sort of response. But eventually, I got a response. But all the emails were very personalized to that person. I would look them up on Facebook or whatever I could do to try and find some way to get in. So I think just understanding what your audience is, who your audience is, and understanding what your message is, and being very consistent and clear and concise with it is important.
I would only add that I think it's important to understand what your goals are as the small business owner. We have at times, when I think about days at Kaiser Permanente, we've purchased 100,000 contact list email addresses, and our only intent was to identify specific emails that may have interest. And so we knew we were going to have a hit rate of less than 1%, but our only intention was to build a database of qualified customers within our service area and narrow that list down. And so if that's the intention, then it's okay to have the gimmicky email potentially, right, that we all receive, because while we might be deleting it, there's somebody out there that is going to confirm that, yes, I'm in your service area, or yes, I'm interested in your product, or I'm in your industry. And then I think beyond that, I would agree with everything Michael said around building the relationship and being very specific.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you. Lastly, what advice would you have for small businesses that truly want to attract customers and encourage meaningful engagement on their social media platforms. We haven't touched on social media much yet.
Yeah, so I'll jump in and then feel free to weigh in after that, and then we can close out. And I'll make it quick. There's a lot I could say here, right? Little things like don't talk about religion or politics or anything else. But I think again, understanding what your goal is as the small business owner. If what you are trying to do is to build brand awareness, simple things such as posting about new employees that you've hired, the office dog, the office remodel, a new piece of technology that you have, can go a long way, because all you're doing is getting brand out about your company and about your organization, and what you stand for. And then you can clearly and obviously go into more detail and offer, free products on a particular weekend or a discount or something else. But I think most importantly is getting very specific about what you want to accomplish, and whether you're trying to build a lead base, whether you're trying to build brand awareness, or whether you're actually trying to close business and generate warm leads.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is, keep it positive. And like you said, don't get political. Don't talk about things that are going to stir the pot. You're making these posts and trying to get the word out about your business. So you want to share positive messages and consistent messaging, like you mentioned. It's great if you and your dog went on a hike at Turkey Mountain, and maybe that's something that you want to post, and maybe that is part of your overall strategy, but it could be confusing if it's not built into the strategy that you've developed. So just make sure that it's consistent. And then the other thing too is, we tell our kids this all the time, but once it goes online, it's there forever. So just keep that in the back of your mind too, as you're developing that strategy and deciding what to post and what not to. And then, limited use of meaningful hashtags, I would say, is appropriate. Nobody likes to see the post with 47 hashtags that you have to scrutinize and look through and you don't even really pay attention to. So I'd say limit that as well.
Great advice. Well, thank you so much, Josiah and Michael. Really appreciate your time. And thank you to everyone who tuned in.